Hello. Yes, I know it's been a few weeks. I can't make any excuses except that I'm usually, as always, traveling way too much. But wanted to put out this video today because there's just so much going on. It actually amazes me how fast our industry keeps on changing. I just came back from the US. As you know, so many projects are on the brink of FID, are going to get to FID, and some of them are pre ordering their equipment. So there's a little bit of excitement in the air, but I did notice a bit of, how can I say it, caution as well. There's definitely a feeling that costs are going up. There's a lot of uncertainty. No one really knows how this uncertainty is going to play out. There seems to be a rush to kind of get to FID for some reason this year. But my conversation with EPC contractors is that, whether you get to EPC now or later this year or whenever, things like tariffs, the uncertainty of tariffs is passed on to the client. So I don't think any EPC guy, any EPC company is actually taking the tariff risk and some of the cost risk and some of the steel price risk and all those other risks. So it kind of not sure why there is this mad rush to get to FID. And of course, anytime you're trying to get to FID, you're not only scrambling with funding, but you're also scrambling with trying to close your contracts. And we have one player now who I think shall remain unsaid that is trying to undersell the market. So we hear about one player coming in and offering tolling fees, whether you call them tolling fees or FOB fees or whatever you want to call them, but fees to process gas into LNG at significantly lower than what the market should be doing in the US, especially we're talking about the US, and what the capex cost would justify. And this is a big worry because if we're all forced to kind of go down to that level, how are these projects not only going to be economic, but how are they going to manage their cost? So, this race to the bottom, not everybody can afford it. I think it's going to hurt some of the less capitalized players more than the more capitalized players. And, I guess it's not really gentlemanly. In our business, we like to think that there's enough market for us all to have our share. But this seems to be playing in an effort to smoke out the competition. The same player is, of course, I think you all guess who it is making life difficult for some of its neighbors, both in both locations. But with things like shipping channels and turning basins, I hear that a lot. But also, the fact is that by going out in these low prices, you're effectively trying to steal some of your the long-term customers of some of the other projects, and that cannot end well. I think that we're trying to race to the bottom. I'm not saying that we should charge a massive premium, but we are a commodity, and there is certain cost of production and certain cost of putting a plant together. And some companies will have to justify paying for that plant and financing that plant purely on its long term contract prices. Others that may have the luxury of having extra volumes that they can then put on the open market, and they can pray and hope that at the time when their project comes along and the commissions, I don't want to use the word, commissioning cargoes again, because we know that's a loaded term. But when they start producing LNG, some of the players who have extra volumes that are uncommitted can then hope for the prices to be high enough to pay for some of the cost overruns. Other players who are maybe smaller players and different type of projects who are not as well funded need to sell all their volumes on the long term basis. And now we are thinking there is seems to be a drive from some players who then, of course, all the customers are going to demand the same thing to bring those prices down. And with so many price uncertainty variables out there, you talk about steel, you talk about the construction cost, you talk about overheated construction in certain areas of Texas and Louisiana, you talk about tariffs, of course. All of these things are out there, and at the same time we have one of us LNG producers that potentially is trying to drive down the prices. So I think that everybody's excited that there's a lot of FIDs happening in the US, and that's great. And, the conversation is really, if you look at the world of LNG supply, We have the US, many projects on the brink of FID, are going to get to FID, or hoping to get to FID in the next 6 months, 8 months, 2 to 3 months. Some have got to FID, and the day they got to FID, they announced an expansion. So there seems to be kind of a real mad rush to get projects out the door. And as we know in our industry, boom bust cycles never really end well. If you build a lot of projects today, you're going to overheat the economy. You're going to overheat the trades, the boilermakers, the welders, the construction crews, etc. So the cost of the building those projects is going to go up, and potentially you and all your neighbors are going to come online at the same time. And we know what that means. That means there's too much supply, and when there's too much supply, and the demand is a constant number, then the prices go down. Now we can hope that the demand is going to be somewhat influenced by prices. I've always said in these videos and other places, there's invisible hand, and when the low price happens, there is more demand, especially in some of the less developed markets, let's just say, or not the less developed, is the more price sensitive markets, South Asia, Africa, Southeast Asia, even. But the fact is that projects are going to be borrowing billions of dollars to pay for the project. And if the prices of the product are going to be driven lower and lower, then these projects are going to struggle financially. And also, we never like to see too many projects happen at the same time. This reminds me of Australia 15 years ago. Australia hadn't been to LNG project in 10 years. And then 6 projects, 8 projects came online literally at the same time. And then it hasn't been a project since. Too many at the same time caused all these projects to overrun. 40% cost overruns, 50% cost overruns, some of them even higher. Years and years of delays. And now there's no more real projects, greenfield projects in Australia anymore because of that bad experience. So let's hope that doesn't happen in the US. But the signs are very troubling. Yes, great to see FIDs, great to see excitement, great to see investors coming into them, but let's not, in this haste, drive the prices too low. Uh, we've also the conversation, as I said, is all about the US. Yes, Canada. There seems to be a bit of trouble in LNG Canada. I don't know enough about what the troubles are. There's always a few hiccups when you commission, but in a drive to probably get that first cargo out, they may have taken some shortcuts. Maybe I don't know if that's the case or not. I'm just guessing. And now we have difficulty maintaining that plant throughput, and ships are turned around. I mean, can you imagine the logistical nightmare? You have a ship coming in from Korea to pick up your cargo in British Columbia, and now the ship is halfway in the Pacific, and the plant tells you, "Hey, we don't, we're not operating right now. Go somewhere else." Where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna go to pick up the cargo that your customer needs to deliver back to Korea at a certain window? There's not many other projects on the west coast of the Americas to pick up the cargo. Are you going to turn around and go to Southeast Asia and hope you get cargoes there? There's not many cargoes out there. So this is not a good situation. Um, Maybe there is something to be said for dragging out the commissioning so you don't have to please your long-term customers right away, because this is not the way the planned commissioning is supposed to work. Now, I haven't heard anything in the last few weeks, but the last I heard was that they delivered one cargo and they haven't delivered a cargo since. I could be wrong, let's be clear. But it's not a good situation. So let's hope that's not something that's going to happen. But other Canadian projects, there's a couple more that are looking to FID, and then I'm not sure the excitement is going to be there for many more. I think I'm surprised, that most people are, that Argentinian, the two floating LNG projects seem to have suddenly got off the ground. I've always been a big skeptical of Argentina, having seen it going up and down. Lots of lost dreams in Argentina over the last 30 years. But hey, the project got to FID, and it looks like the gas is going to be there. So Argentina could come out suddenly from zero to hero. So let's see if that happens in the next few years. And then we have the projects that are being developed in the Middle East, Abu Dhabi and Qatar. Qatar, I've heard rumors are that things are not going as well as they should for the expansions, but I'm sure they'll get their act together. But other than that, are there any real new sources of supply? I don't think so. Now, of course, the big uncertainty in all of this is what's going to happen with Russia. We had the so-called summit in Alaska. I found that quite fun to amusing to watch. A lot of nothingness right now, but obviously there's talk. And when there's talk, there will be potentially peace at some time or the other. And when Russia makes peace, it's going to almost demand. And if it cannot demand, it's going to drop its price so much that its gas gets sold again, and it needs to rebuild its economy, rebuild its arms, rebuild everything. And so it's going to start selling gas to Europe at a very low price. And it's going to be very, very hard for the Europeans to not accept that gas. I mean, we all have our principles, but when the price is low, those principles can be bent. So Russia is going to start exporting pipeline gas, I think, very soon after the so-called peace, whenever the peace happens. And Russia has a couple of LNG plants, a couple of them that are built, of course, the Sakhalin and the Yamal, but there's a couple of that I think have been built but not really producing because of sanctions. Those will open up the gates. So we're going to have a lot of Russian supply, and the Russians have proved that they can build these LNG plants without American help, without Western help. So I think Russia is going to be the big unknown in all of this. So seeing a lot of supply coming out from different places, and I hope that the demand keeps up. European demand destruction seems to be quite evident. I can't say I'm pleased, but we have seen a massive backlash around the world for renewable energy now. I know there's going to be people saying I'm just making this up and blah blah blah, but Australians are feel where I am. You see a great backlash against power prices going up. We see what's happening in the UK, where suddenly there's political pressure from to the ruling party that their net zero targets are not going to be met. I think the Europeans are kind of done with a lot of the net zero targets. We've seen a lot of the financiers that all jumped on the net zero banking group to promote net zero. They're all kind of silently pulling out. I think the Shells and the BPs and have all already pulled out of the net zero alliance. And now the banks are also going to start pulling out. These are the same banks that basically turned their backs on the oil and gas industry when the World Bank told them not to invest 5 years ago in the oil and gas industry. And the same banks are now quietly getting out of the net zero alliances. I heard a interesting statistic the other day that 2 3 years ago in the earning call, 200 and what is it, something like 400 out of the 500 companies at S&P 500 were mentioning net zero goals. And in the latest earnings calls that just went in the last few months, only 100 to 200 companies are mentioning net zero anymore. So the companies are not promoting it. If companies don't promote it, are they still going to follow it? It's hard to know. Does the market really care? I don't know if it cares anymore. Right now, customers are not showing that they care. Customers are more worried about their pocketbook, the inflation, and they're just not prepared to pay the higher prices. Of course, they're happy to take clean energy if it doesn't cost a lot more. But if it costs more, and you got to cover extremely high, transmission costs from the wind generators, or to cover the intermittency, or whatever the case might be that we see in different parts of the world, they're not prepared. And so the projects get canceled because they don't have secure offtake. We're seeing offshore wind suddenly lose a lot of favor around the world. Companies like Ørsted are basically, on the brink of bankruptcy potentially. Projects are being canceled everywhere. Don't even get me started on things like hydrogen. Oh my God. Remember just a few years ago in places like Western Australia, we had 70 projects, publicized. Today we have zero, as far as I know. Maybe one or two. Maybe that's it. I think one or a couple of our internal projects within refineries and things like that. But for the most part, the hype is completely deflated. And we spent a lot, we wasted and pissed away a lot of money in the process. So I'm kind of glad to see that we're coming back to reality. We're coming back to supporting the oil and gas industry. We need to really, our biggest goal in all of us should be to alleviate energy poverty around the world. There's still 2 billion people in the world who cook with wood, dung, and charcoal. And these people are inhaling massive amounts of pollutants in very unventilated spaces. I've heard, an average person cooking in those places is smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, the equivalent. So that's a major health hazard to one quarter of the world. Why are we not doing anything about it? The way to solve it, of course, is cooking gas, and cooking gas or cooking through electricity. And that happens when we promote energy that can be affordable, available, and hopefully low carbon as possible. So that's my 2 cents. I've covered a lot of topics this time. Um, let's, obviously I could talk about the arbitration ruling against Shell. The Venture Global Shell ruling went against Shell and went for Venture Global. A surprise to all of us, but hey, maybe facts came out that we don't know. Maybe the media hyped it the wrong way. I'm not in a position to comment on it. uh, I just would like to see the good guys win at the end. That's always the goal. Thanks everyone. Good luck. Bye.